Great. Thank you so much, Brett. Tzaharaim Tovim, Mi'Yerushalayim. Good afternoon from Jerusalem. Boker Tov in the States. Wonderful to see you all back in our virtual Beit Midrash. As you could see, delighted to report that every week our class is growing. So, Hadavar Noda, as they say. So great to see all of you familiar faces and lovely to have some new faces on board this week. Our topic for today's session is chapter 3 of the book of Ruth. Hopefully all of you got a chance to read chapter 3. I am sure you remember how it is that we're reading text. So we're going to take our time savoring the nuance of the different words, phrases, verses of chapter 3 as we go through this very, very and risque chapter. Midnight encounter. Okay, it's not only transformative, but it could be an episode of Sex and the City. Okay, of course, it all depends on how it is that you read and understand this text. A lot of going into the ins and outs of this particular chapter. Like the second chapter that we took ends with Naomi and Ruth home alone. Okay, that essentially is going to be the bookends again. Okay. Just like in the second chapter, it opened with Naomi and Ruth home alone, right, on their own. It closed alone, the two of them alone. Same thing with this chapter, okay? So we're starting out once again. We would probably expect that because so much has happened in this text, that their fundamental circumstances would have changed by now. But in fact, they remain the same. Okay, meaning that they are still quite lonely in Beit Lechem. Okay, it's not that anyone's knocking on, providing food for them, right? We have no inkling that anyone is really taking care of them. The kinsman Boaz, who gave Ruth all of that grain, 21 quarts of barley to schlep back to her mother. We have of a character that is taking care of Naomi and Ruth. So the chapter itself is divided into 3 parts. The first part of the chapter is Naomi's daring plan for desperate times. Or perhaps we should say desperate plan for desperate times. Okay, this is verses 1 through 5 of the chapter. The second part of the chapter, the second of the 3 parts that we're looking at, Ruth and Boaz on the threshing floor, okay, verses 6 through 15. And then the final third part that we're going to explore is homecoming with good news and grain. That is Ruth's homecoming and embrace by Naomi, right, when she returns at the end of this sordid evening, okay? So, what I want you to see at the very, very beginning of this chapter is how Naomi is transitioning from a victim of calamity to a shaper of destiny. Okay, that's the first important piece that I want you to notice as we jump into reading this opening paragraph together. So let's understand the instructions that Naomi is giving to Ruth at this point. Okay, as I read through it, pay attention to precisely what it is that Naomi says. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "Daughter, I must seek a home for you where you may be happy. Now, there is our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to. He will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not disclose yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down and go over and uncover his feet and lie down. he will tell you what you are to do. She replied, that is, Ruth replied, I will do everything you tell me. Okay, so the first question that I want to address here is what is it that Naomi says, and what is her motivation? Whose welfare is she concerned with? Is she concerned with Ruth's welfare, or is it more about her?
Both.
Audrey,
Both.
nice and loud. Okay, why do you say both?
Well, you must make the assumption that Naomi cares about Ruth at this point. She admires her and she wants a future for her. So you go into, at least I go into this assuming she wants to help and protect Ruth. She obviously thinks well of her kinsman, that he will do well by her. But
Okay.
she's also looking to protect herself. But self-interest is a human nature.
Very
So
good. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with self-interest.
it's
No.
survival. It's
Good.
survival.
Good.
I was
Yeah,
just going to add that from what we discussed last time, that the townspeople weren't so thrilled with Naomi's husband and how he left town. So the self-interest really for herself is to establish their family again so that she will be part of the community and be taken care of when she needs to be.
Right. Okay, very good. Marilyn.
Well, the other way that she's looking after herself, she, Naomi, is more or less responsible for Ruth.
Right.
So if she can find Ruth a husband, then she doesn't have the responsibility. She's got no income, presumably. So it's, to put it at rock bottom, she's another mouth to feed, even though she's doing a lot of work by doing the gleaning. But you can't do the gleaning year round necessarily.
Right, very good. Okay, right, as you're pointing out, she's potentially another mouth to feed. But in the same breath, I would say Ruth is also doing the grocery shopping.
Yes.
She's bringing the barley home, not the bacon, but the barley. But you're right, Marilyn, to point our attention to the fact that Naomi is deeply concerned about Ruth finding a husband. And we know that not just from the chapter that we're looking at now, but we know that from the very, very first chapter.
Yes.
When she presses, right? You want to say it, Marilyn?
She presses the two women to stay behind because presumably they can invite men to marry.
Exactly.
If they come with her,
Right.
then they're leaving all that behind, quite literally.
When she's leaving Beit Lechem, Naomi is of her daughters-in-law.
Right.
Them to go back to their mother's homes, right? To find themselves, a ben zug, to find themselves partners back in the land of Moab, right? So it's clear that this is something that she's deeply concerned about. In that first sense that we know that she is genuine about Ruth is because of the repetition of lach, okay, meaning for you, right? She says, and you even see this reflected in the English translation as well. I must see you,
Right.
where you, okay, so the repetition twice, Hebrew and in the English, right? The Hebrew word is manoach. I want to say for the purposes of this technical Israel means for a woman around home, either the father or the husband.
Right.
Okay, so that's what she's referring to here. She simply wants good for Ruth, and she goes on to explain. Boaz, whose girls you were close to, he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. Okay, so a little bit about the reality of what it is that we're reading about here. right? What does it mean to winnow on the threshing floor? Okay, I want to read to you. This is the JPS commentary. And here's what they explain. Okay, since I know we are a bit from our agricultural agrarian,
You are.
remind us Israelites what it is to winnow barley. Okay, so here's what JPS explains. Literally, winnowing is scattering the threshing floor of barley tonight. The verb often applies to people, as when God scatters Israel among the nations, but the present verse illustrates the agricultural basis of the term. In ancient Israel, harvested and bound sheaves of grain were carried by hand or cart to a large flat area where the grain was pounded on the ground, threshing, to loosen the kernels from their hard husks and other chaff. Then, as the prevailing winds of late afternoon came up, the threshers winnowed the threshed grain by throwing it upward. They collected the heavier grain kernels, which fell to the ground. The chaff, being lighter, was carried downwind. A large, flat, outdoor space where many farmers and farmhands would gather together at the end of the harvest to perform the seasonal task of processing harvested sheaves into usable grain berries. It was a large communal facility, and the threshing floor tended to be located outside of the town by the gates, okay? So that sets the scene for us, okay? You've got a better idea of what it is that was happening there. Now, I also want to share with you how it is that a medieval commentator expands on the possible conversation that was that unfolded between Naomi and Ruth. Okay, and here's what he writes. He has Naomi mention liberate marriage and also speak about the value of coupling with Boaz on other grounds. Al-Sheikh has Naomi explain to Ruth that to be actualized, holiness must be mixed with something that seems forbidden. As examples, she discusses the marriage of Jacob to two sisters and the union of Judah and Tamar, which in his retelling was sanctioned by an angel who told Judah to unite with Tamar so that the consummation would not be entirely as it should. It all depends on your coupling. So the very holiness of something great requires it to contain sin. Of a medieval commentator. Do we have any inkling of this from the literal? We don't see it here at all. Right? And here is because you might think that Naomi's primary purpose is this whole business of liberate marriage, right? Which we're going to get into more depth when we take a look at work. That's when, right, leaves the widow behind, right? The widow is childless. It tells us that she would take, if there is another brother, she would take the brother of the deceased, and that brother is required to perpetuate the name of the deceased. Okay, in other words, to have children with the widow, and so on. Now, it seems that she is simply concerned for Ruth's future here. The other one I'll share with you is from Frederick Bush. Okay, I want to just read on. She says, do not disclose yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down and go over and uncover his seat. I will tell you what you are to do. She replied, I will do everything you tell me. What are we to make of this business of uncovering feet? What does that say to you?
She's docile and subservient.
Audrey, say that again.
She's docile and she's subservient.
Okay, she's docile and subservient, perhaps, right? Well, she's certainly docile and subservient in how it is that she responds to Naomi after receiving these instructions.
Well, it's a move toward intimacy to the next, whatever the next step's going to be in a relationship. I would think the instructions would make you think that. I believe.
Good, Andy. So unpack this a bit more. Right? What is it to uncover one's feet?
I'm not sure what it meant in those days, but if you're taking off any part of the clothes or you're lifting up there, I would assume it's going to the next of forging a physical relationship.
Okay.
I mean, that would be my guess.
It's not the feet.
No, it's not. You're right, Marilyn. It's not. Sorry.
Excellent chavruta between the two of you, Andy and Marilyn. Much of Boaz's underside.
Right.
Naomi wants her to, but sir, I want to read to you Frederick Bush, what expression. Okay, here it is. Even though it is scarcely probable that the word margalotav, which is what we see in the Hebrew, his legs, is functioning here as a euphemism for organs, it is not the word is intentionally ambiguous, leaving it quite uncertain how much of the lower half of Boaz's body is uncovered. Second, the use of the verb gila, uncover, governing a noun for the region of the legs, could hardly find at least two idioms. Expression to uncover the skirt, 23. And then another example, to uncover the nakedness of, see in Leviticus 18. So in this light, Campbell is indeed correct. It is quite incomprehensible that a Hebrew storyteller could use such terms all in the same context and not suggest to his audience a negative set of circumstances confronts them. Okay, very, very important. Okay, we don't believe what Naomi is suggesting. Stands the very, very strong sexual overtones of this text. Not only that, I want to return to Audrey's comment before about Ruth being submissive in a way here. Okay, there is a whole lot that Naomi is asking of Ruth here. Okay, right. And the same commentator that I just read before, Frederick Bush, highlights the risk that's posed to Ruth in these circumstances. Okay, here's what he says. The course of action outlined by Naomi entails the greatest risk to both her reputation and her person. True, both in his characterization of Boaz when we're introduced to him in chapter 2, verse 1, and in recording Boaz's actions and words through chapter 2, the narrator has signaled to us that Boaz is a generous and kind man of integrity who is faithful to his responsibilities. Nevertheless, the course of action outlined by Naomi could result, as far as Ruth could know, in several eventualities vastly different from the home and husband intended. Okay, here are the possibilities. Number one, since Ruth has not contracted a new marriage, she is still the wife of Machlon. So Boaz could charge her with failing in her family responsibilities and possibly even brand her an adulteress. Number two, he could use the sexual pleasure and then with male character and perhaps even charge her with prostitution. Three, he could deride the wealthy and powerful landowner as delusions of grandeur. Yet Ruth raises neither question nor objection, but simply responds, all that you say, I will do. Okay, what does that remind you of, by the way? Marilyn?
Well, what the Israelites say when Moses is giving various laws, that all that you say we will do.
Very good.
But
Apropos,
I wanted to raise something else. I mean, in that commentary, point one, no, she's not still married. Her husband died, and okay, he died in Moab. I don't think she's got a death certificate, but here's the deal: if your husband has died, or if your wife has died, you are free to remarry. There's no.
Yes and no, but see, the issue that this commentary is referring to is the issue of levirate marriage.
No, I understand that.
Right. Okay. Meaning that she has a responsibility to the perpetuation of Machlon's name. That's what this is getting at.
Oh, sorry. No, because I was an Israelite.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know if he's somehow kindred to Naomi or not. The book doesn't say.
In some way, isn't this as much a test of Boaz Ruth? What kind is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And Audrey, that is going to unfold right here in this chapter, okay? I think you're absolutely right. It's both a test for Ruth, but also a test of Boaz to see under these sexually charged, right? Is he going to be the Gibor Chayil, the man of value that we hope for, right? Or is he going to cave into? Okay, that's what remains to be answered here. Okay. One other book I want to take a look at one. Okay. Yes, I want to read this to you. This is an excerpt from an essay by Judith Cates on our chapter. The essay is entitled Women at the Center. Okay, and she picks up on the same issue that Frederick Bush highlighted. And here's what Judith Cates says. It would be hard to overestimate just how daring and risky a scheme it is. Ruth is already vulnerable, a woman alone, a foreigner with no man obligated to protect her. Naomi proposes to startle Boaz into remembering his connections to her family by placing Ruth in a situation of even greater vulnerability. She is to risk her reputation and the tolerance of the community by going to him secretly at night. Ruth is not just a foreigner, but a member of a people despised and considered dangerous because of their sexual depravity. Israel's contempt for Moabites is embodied most fully, after all, in the story inscribed in Genesis 19 of Moab's origins in the incestuous intercourse of Lot and his daughters. Naomi proposes that Ruth, the Moabite woman, deliberately cast herself in the role of seductress, making herself sexually attractive and hoping that Boaz's response will continue to be one of kindness and generosity. Perhaps to minimize the potential scandal, Naomi instructs Ruth to take initiative only to the point of attracting his attention. Then she prescribes the conventional, listen to this, Audrey, then she prescribes the conventional submissive female role,
Right.
waiting for him to tell her what to do.
Mm-hmm.
The text heightens the drama and deepens our understanding of Ruth's character. We have to imagine Ruth waiting anxiously until midnight when Boaz wakes up in a panic. Okay, so good. Any other comments before we move on? Or you are all sitting on the edge of your seat.
You're right.
Okay, don't cover your eyes. You can cover your feet, but not. Okay, verse number 6. She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. Boaz ate and drank, and in a cheerful mood went down to lie down beside the grain pile. Then she went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, the man gave a start and pulled back. There was a woman lying at her feet. Excuse At his feet. At his feet. So let's first talk about the location that's identified here. Okay, what is the significance of telling us that he was lying down beside the grain pile? Okay, in the Hebrew, ha'arima.
Was he protecting it, guarding it in a way?
Okay,
The grain.
possibly, Andy. Okay,
It was symbolic of his wealth.
say that again.
It's symbolic.
Oh, interesting. Right, it could also have his wealth. Okay, another way to understand it. At the end of the heap of grain, that's the pile that we're talking about. Phyllis Tribble writes, it's a minor detail execution of the plan. Yeah, separate from the other sleepers and accessible to the waiting woman. Is this detail another hint of that blessed chance which aids these women? Earlier, Ruth happened to come to the field. Does Boaz happen now at the corner of the threshing floor? We cannot be sure. Right, the point is that this area is semi-private. Okay, it's set aside from the other laborers. Right, it would represent great chutzpah for Ruth to show up at Boaz's doorstep. Right, and obviously she wouldn't want to do this, right, in a place where the other workers are sleeping. Right, so we know that they're in a semi-private area at this point. We're told by Yehi b'chatzi halayla, and it came to pass in the middle of the night. Many of you may recognize those words, Yehi b'chatzi halayla, from where? A song that we sing, Seder evening.
Yes, Seder evening, Pesach.
Yes.
Everybody is in a
Right,
food coma at that point, and probably nobody makes it to that particular song. Right, but it's a very, very beautiful song. And what the piyut, what the poem does, is it weaves together a number of passages taken from all over Hebrew scriptures, how very, very significant events, liminal events, happen in the middle of the night. Right? And so one of those events that happens in the middle of the night, and this particular verse from Ruth is quoted in that Passover song, right, is right this turning point of the story, as it were. Boaz wakes up, he's completely frightened. And what I want you to see here is the word that's used is vayecherad ha'ish. Okay, that what is, do you recognize the root of that word vayecherad? What do we call the ultra-Orthodox Jews?
Haredim.
Haredi.
Excellent, charedim. This
Yeah.
is where it comes from. Okay, it means to tremble. Okay, that word charedim, right, refers to people who tremble in the presence of God. Right, they tremble with awe. They're awestruck in the presence of God. Okay, it's interesting because it could either refer to awe as in wonder, or it could also refer to fear, having great fear. Right, for this moment that we're reading right now, Boaz is trembling with fear when he wakes up. Okay, and he sees this woman that's lying at his feet. Okay, what is it? What do you think it is that frightens Boaz in this moment? Why is he so startled?
I don't think he would expect to find a woman at his feet. I mean, that's a surprise. I wasn't in his game plan, maybe.
Okay, at least that night, Andy, it wasn't in the game plan.
No, it wasn't in the game plan that night.
Okay.
Well, it could be a damage to his reputation.
Very good, Marilyn.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. It could also be very, very damaging to his reputation, right? And I love that you said that because it's going to pick up on a verse that we see later in the chapter, where he makes very, very clear that he's concerned about how this whole evening plays out and what it's going to look like, you know, when people see Ruth walk away. Okay, so yes, very, very good. So it could be his honor, his kavod that he's concerned about. Any other possibilities? Okay. Tamara Eskenazi writes the following. Okay, she says, perhaps we are to suppose that Boaz does not recognize Ruth because it is dark and he is startled. Or perhaps because she is so transformed in her new garb that he cannot tell her she is the woman he has previously known. The Midrash suggests that Boaz may not realize that this night visitor is human. Ruth Rabbah and later Rashi explain that Boaz fears he's being confronted by a female demon. Such figures appear in ancient Near Eastern sources. One of these is Lilith, whose very name is evoked by the night. Right? You hear the similarity, Lila and Lilith. Imagines Boaz saying, if you are a spirit, go away. And if you are human, Ruth Rabbah takes the expression Vailafet, pulled back, to mean that Ruth clings to him so that he feels her hair and reminds himself that spirits have no hair. He then asks, who are you, a spirit or a woman? When she answers a woman, he says, a free woman or married, and she answers free. Finally, he asks, ritually pure or impure? She says pure. Only then does she tell him who she is. Okay? So, right, bringing this into the text here. Vayomer miat, he asks, who are you? Vatomer, Anochi Ruth amatecha. I am Ruth, your maidservant. Amatecha al amatcha ki goel ata. And then she goes on to say, spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, the whole business of spreading. Also, what does it mean to be a redeeming kinsman? I know we touched on this a bit.
That's, she's supposed to child in for the in place of the husband that had passed away, and but he wasn't really the next of kinsman. There was another one there, I believe. There was a closer kinsman, but he was the next one in line after that.
Okay, very good, Anne. It's not when it's talking about the term goel here. It's not referring that specifically to liberate marriage. Okay, and essentially there are three instances that we have, three legal instances in Tanakh where it talks about what it means to be a goel, to be a redeemer. Okay, one is in the case of blood vengeance, right? Another is in the case of redeeming property, and another is in the case of freeing a slave. None of those very, very specific legal instances that Tanakh speaks of apply here, right? So all of the commentators that I've read seem to interpret this quite liberally and generally, saying that what does it mean to be a goel here? It means to be a redeemer, as in a family member who saves other family from poverty, right? From an impoverished situation. Okay, that's what it's talking about, right? And when we talk about spread your robe over your handmaid, okay, this is what Tamara Ashkenazi writes. Many interpreters read Ruth's request as implying a marital liaison. They understand the word kanafecha as your robe, referring to an act of espousal and betrothal. But the noun kanaf typically refers to wings. Ruth is asking for protection or patronage without spelling out how Boaz is to provide this support. Earlier, Boaz prayed that God, under whose wings she was seeking shelter, would reward Ruth. Here, she is asking him to spread his wings over her. thus inviting him to become God's agent. Even if Naomi has designed a sexual strategy for this encounter, Ruth desexualizes her plan by calling Boaz to responsibility, not romance. Right? The Targum reflects the more typical rabbinic interpretation. It omits the phrase, spread your robe over your handmaid, and replaces it with, let your name be called over your maidservant by taking me to wife, inasmuch as you are a redeemer. Right? But what Tamara said first it really reflects the literal sense of this text. It's not about a marriage proposal. Right? It's about protecting her. She's seeking protection. And she's not spelling out to Boaz how that will happen, but she's planting the seeds. She's planting the seeds literally and figuratively here. Okay, and notice how it is that Boaz responds. He says the following. He exclaimed, "Be blessed of the Lord, daughter. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first, in that you have not turned to younger men, whether poor or rich. And now, daughter, have no fear. I will do on your behalf whatever you ask, for all the elders of my town know what a fine woman you are. But while it is true, I am a redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night, then in the morning, if he will act as a redeemer, good, let him redeem. But if he does not want to act as a redeemer for you, I will do so myself as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning." Okay, that is the end of Boaz's statement. So let's take this apart. Okay, first, his response, very, very gracious. It's one of blessing. Be blessed of the Lord, daughter. And then he says the following. Hetaft chasdecha acharon min harishon. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first.
Right.
What is Ruth's first gesture of loyalty? What is he referring to?
Taking care of following Naomi. I
Okay,
would.
that's one candidate, Andy.
Right.
Okay, it could be, right, the loyalty of following Naomi. Give me another possibility. Got a whole menu of possibilities how to understand this.
I was just, go ahead, Marilyn. I was going to say something about going to the field in the chapter we read last week to get food. I mean,
Excellent.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's,
taking
So-
care of
yeah,
Naomi.
that was what I was going to say.
Very
Also,
good.
the idea of feeding, providing for Naomi.
Excellent. Okay, Marilyn and Andy, great. That it could be the act of chesed, of loving kindness that he's referring to here, is the fact that she's bringing nourishment
Mhm.
to Naomi. Okay, she's providing food. Okay, so it's both that she refuses to leave Naomi.
Mhm.
Okay, also, right, providing food. There's another possibility.
Mhm. Let's see what else.
Okay, this you have to be a deep thinker, and you've got to go back to chapter 1.
Oh, I missed.
You have to go back to what it is that Naomi says to Ruth as they're about to start their journey. Okay? In verse 8, chapter 1, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Turn back, each of
Turn
you,
back,
to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." So perhaps her first act of chesed, her first act of kindness, was dealing kindly with her deceased husband, Machlon.
Okay.
Okay, that she provides for his burial. Right? We say that burial is called in Jewish tradition, it's called chesed shel emet.
Mhm.
It's the kindness of truth. And why is that? It's because it can never be repaid.
Right.
So it could be that the chesed that Boaz is referring to, the first chesed, is what she did for her late husband.
Okay.
Okay, so we got 3 very, very strong candidates here. Right? Probably have to take a vote as to what it is. Okay, we don't know. Okay, but the point is that there's a lot of kindness that Ruth has done already. And what specifically here in this scenario is the act of kindness? What is Boaz saying is her act of kindness? Because what could she have done?
Well, nothing. I mean, she could have just vamoosed and not gone back with Naomi, just sort of tended to her own affairs.
Okay, but Marilyn, go back into these verses, our chapter now. Chapter.
He says, Boaz says that you didn't go look for, made a pitch for me is basically what he.
Very, very good. Right? You didn't
It's
go for
correct. It's something we say all the time. I mean, you know, when you talk about being men looking for women or women looking for younger men or whatever, we say the same thing. So it's strange.
Right. Now, most likely, Boaz is of Naomi's generation.
Right.
Right. Not of
Yes,
Ruth's
That's
correct.
the sense that I get.
Right?
Me too.
Exactly. Right. So he's saying just the fact that you know she's there at his feet, right? This is an act of chesed on her part. Okay. And what does he say? Okay. He responds, "I will do in your behalf whatever you ask." What does that sound like?
Interesting.
Sounds like he took the bait. He's there. He's there.
He certainly did, right? But
Yeah,
it's
free
exactly
translation.
like Ruth's response to Naomi, right? When Ruth receives those instructions to go down to the threshing floor,
Correct.
how does Ruth respond? Everything you tell me, I will
I
honor.
will do.
Okay, and now, right? Midah keneged midah, in a positive way, measure for measure.
Right.
Okay, the chesed that Ruth did for Naomi in giving her respect is now coming back upon her. In that Boaz says, whatever you want, I will do.
Mhm.
Okay, so he's giving her the same respect.
Matt, it seems to me that Ruth and Naomi are pretty smart women. If you look at I mean, even just thinking that Naomi told her what to do and even to wait and not go move herself from where she was to where Boaz was until he had drink and had, ate and had some drink. It, put the plan together so it could be the most successful for both of them.
Very, very good, Andy. Right, notice that Ruth is not simply the passive character that Naomi wants her to be.
Right.
Naomi said, just wait until he gives you instructions. That's not what Ruth does.
No.
But Ruth is a woman of action. She's
Right. Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So, they're both very, very smart. They're very wise. They're very thoughtful. They know they've got their vision, and they are going to work toward that vision. They're going to take us there. Right? So it's a shot in the arm to see how proactive these characters are. Right? Nothing is going to be left to chance. So he says, that all of the elders of the town know that you're what? An Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. And he goes on, but while it is true I am a redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night. Okay, then in the morning, if you will act as a redeemer, good, let him redeem. If he does not want to act as a redeemer for you, I will do so myself. So the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. Okay, so here's where he raises the possibility of a closer family member that could act in this role of Goel, okay, of this redeeming relationship. Part of what's so interesting in the Midrash, well, first let me say, in the pshat of the text, in chapter 3 and chapter 4, we have no idea who this person is.
Right.
We are never given the name of this person, right? And for good reason. One of the reasons that the rabbis say we're not given his name is they say it was a matter of derech eretz. It was a matter of menschlichkeit. Because
Right.
ultimately, this kinsman is not going to act as a redeemer. So we didn't want to cast aspersions upon him. We didn't want to speak lashon hara about him. So the text itself is teaching us what it is to be a mensch. However, the midrash, one of the midrashim I read, makes the argument that his name is Tov.
Good.
Okay, because in the Hebrew here, it says Tov Yigal. Okay, Tov will redeem. Okay, so this particular midrash makes the argument. It's the stretch, Marilyn. I see it on your face. Okay.
Well, I'm just thinking of something totally, well, not totally irrelevant, but The Raven, the poem by Edgar Allan Poe. My father asked me once, what's the name of the raven? And I said, I don't know. And he said, quoth,
Well,
quoth the raven.
Love it, love it.
So it's sort of the same thing. I know that the Bible does that in various places, but you know, it's like, oh, please.
Yes, yeah, agreed, agreed. But we certainly have to give them credit for trying.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the inventiveness that you see with these midrashim are really, really spectacular.
Okay, and it shows, by the way, what I love about midrash is that it gives you that to read a text for the rabbis,
Hmm.
when you read a piece of Torah, right, it's like a love letter between God. And so how do you read a love letter?
That's for certain. You analyze
Excellent.
each, you look at each phrase, you see how it goes together, all of that.
Right. So that's how I understand the whole enterprise of Midrash, right? That's really what it's about. Going in between the lines, going into that's what's happening. Some of these things might be a stretch of our imagination, right? Others lead us in very, very creative and thoughtful, directions. What I also mean is the amount of times in verse 13 that the word Gaal, the root, appears. Okay, 4 times verse. Okay, and it's underscoring Gaal, Geulah, Redeemer, redemption is part of this text. It's the core message of the book of Ruth, right? It's about redemption. Okay, that's where we're headed. Redemption that takes place between the arch enemies of Moab and Israel. It's also about the redemption of the Israelite people at this, right? And that redemption is through King David and then Mashiach ben David, and then through the Messiah. So verse 14, she listens to Boaz, okay? She lay at his feet until dawn. She rose before one person could distinguish another, okay? Meaning, right, it was probably, about 4:30 in the morning, right? It was still pitch black. And what does Boaz say? Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, hold out the shawl you are wearing. She held it out while he measured out 6 measures of barley, and he put it on her back. Okay, what is all of this about?
He's continuing to look after her.
Yeah, he was yet again protecting her.
Yes.
Okay, Marilyn, say more.
I mean, 6 measures of barley, I don't really know how much that is in modern parlance, but maybe it's more than you could glean. The point is, he's giving her this. She hasn't even had to work at it. He knows that Naomi is at home kind of waiting in the wings. So on the one hand, he wants her to get out of there before light comes. But on the other, he's not going to send her back empty-handed. And that's another theme that you get hither and yon in the Bible. So he's still taking care of.
Okay, very good. Okay, so one possibility here is the reason he does this is simply the core motivation is yet another act of chesed, in that he's giving her food to bring back.
He's taking on the role of protector now.
That's
He has now taken on the role of protector.
Yes.
Before he was generous. Now
Right.
he's taken on a different role.
Okay, so he's taking it to another level, Audrey.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, what is another possibility as to why Boaz acts the way he does here?
I think he's stealing the bargain. I mean, what he said about, in a way, looking to the future. This demonstrates his first step in that way.
He is now her protector.
Right.
Okay, protect.
There's something else.
Yes.
He's going to have to go wandering off to check into the other kinsman.
Right.
So he's not going to be at the feet. Maybe this way, she doesn't have to come down there either.
Okay. So let me share another very, very interesting study. Okay, I believe this is the shot. This state, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor, indicates that Ruth's visit and needed to be kept private by the wish to protect Ruth's as an Eshet Chayil as well. His solicitude for Ruth, the comment also serves to highlight the risky nature of this nocturnal visit for Ruth's within society. Hubbard writes, one can easily imagine what impression their meeting would create among the Beth, an old man victimized by Moabites, a clandestine lover's tryst, a conspiracy to get around the law. This could be catastrophic. Okay, it's a commentary.
Yes.
Okay, so even though Marilyn, I want to believe that, he was also concerned about providing nourishment again, right? And Audrey about being the protector. He's also concerned about their reputations.
Do we have any idea of Boaz's age compared to Ruth's age?
Yes, most likely, Ira, Boaz was of the same generation as Naomi.
Ah.
Okay, he's significantly older than Ruth.
And we know this how?
Okay,
Ruth
we know this from a few verses back, when he says in verse 10, your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first, in that you have not turned to younger men, whether poor or rich.
I see.
Okay? So he's acknowledging that he's an older guy here. So we believe from everything that we could piece together in the story that he's from the fact that he's a man of means, right? He's clearly accumulated wealth in the community, and this statement, he's pretty advanced in age.
Well, now as then, we know that we men are fragile vessels and can be easily, shall we say, manipulated. So I was just, I can see where this could be all kinds of problems.
Right, so it could be that Boaz, was thinking long and hard about this, right? But also there, it was an opportunity for him. He could have had some fun that night, but he doesn't. Okay, like the beauty of this whole encounter is that it takes us to the precipice, but we don't go over the cliff with them. Okay, meaning that there's a red line here, and we're not going to cross that red line. Okay, I sincerely believe truly nothing happened that night. It's there's all the sexual innuendo, but still I don't, I think both of them were showing great restraint, as compared to plenty of other stories in Tanakh where characters do not show the same kind of restraint.
Right.
So again, it's showing us the inner strength of these characters. They have great gumption. So he does this. He puts the grain in her shawl to give her cover as she's walking back in the morning. So this way, when she's walking back disheveled at 6 in the morning, she's at least walking back with a load of grain, right? So nobody would really question, okay, clearly, they were out of food. She went to get food. Okay, so hopefully the Bethlehemites aren't going to think twice about where she was. Simply, she went to the makolet. She went to the corner shop to get some milk. That's what this is about. Okay, let's turn to the final paragraph of the chapter. When she got back to the town, she came to her mother-in-law, who asked, "How is it with you, daughter?" She told her all that the man had done for her, and she added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to me, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" And Naomi said, "Stay here, daughter, till you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but we'll settle the matter today." Okay. First of all, when she gets back to town, and sees Naomi, what is Naomi's question? If you look in the Hebrew, Naomi's question is not quite, "How is it with you, daughter?" but rather it's "Mi at." Who are you? Okay, how are we to understand that question? Who are you?
By her actions, she would show who she was in the sense of character, in the sense of loyalty, and all the things we have talked about.
Okay. Okay, so good, Audrey. Possibly by her actions. Marilyn?
I didn't hear you.
You have to unmute. Yeah.
No, I
There
did
I
not
am.
hear you.
There I am. Maybe it's a question related to her status. That is, what happened in the sense of, is he interested in redeeming you, adopting you? Did he throw you out? I mean, all these different things.
Right. Okay.
It seems to me that that's what Naomi is asking.
Okay, very good. Right. Most likely that's what the question is about. How has this evening transformed you?
Right.
What have you become? Okay, what is your status now? Okay, that's all wrapped up into the query of Naomi. Andy?
I was just going to say it's probably underneath it all. Did she cross any lines that she shouldn't have crossed? Okay. Which is part of the question, Miat, who are you? Right.
Okay, so maybe Naomi was being a bit of a yachna.
A little bit.
What's a yachna?
Right.
I don't know the term.
So,
I mean, I can
good
guess, but I
question,
don't know.
Marilyn.
I'm sorry?
A yenta.
Yeah,
Oh,
gather of gossip.
That
okay.
is the best way to translate it.
Well,
okay?
that's what I figured, but
Okay. One who goes around, reveling in gossip. Okay.
Right.
So we're told that Ruth related to her all that the man had done for her. Obviously, we know that Ruth was much more proactive on that threshing floor. Right? She didn't just simply do what Naomi wanted, but there was a whole lot more to it. That just like we pointed out before, like these women are very, very smart characters. They're very, very strategic in what they do. So there's a whole lot of planning that went into this. And she responds, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to me, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.' Al tavoi rekam." Okay, do not go back empty. First of all, the use of that word rekam, what does that remind you of? Empty.
well,
Didn't she say something about being empty or maybe it was Naomi that said it. It said
I
something
think it was
about,
Naomi.
Naomi said it about being empty when she came back to,
Bethlehem.
yeah,
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem.
Very, very good. Okay, that's the play on words, the what it is that this text is alluding to. Okay, so it's going back to this notion of emptiness, right, juxtaposed to fullness.
Right.
Right? So she is being provided with food now. She's being taken care of. But part of what's so striking here is I believe, and many others believe, this is a bit of a white lie that Ruth is telling. Okay, did it literally happen in the story that Boaz said this to her?
No, he
Okay,
did not say that. I went back and looked.
okay, there you go, Marilyn. Okay, he didn't say that. Okay, but she's sweetening Boaz's, she's making Boaz look really good
Mhm.
to Naomi. Okay.
Well, I guess you could argue that it's the implication, but he didn't say it according to the text.
Right. No. Yes, one could say that it's implied there, but it's certainly not explicitly there. Which leads me to believe that part of maybe what's going on in Ruth's mind is she knows that Naomi is still suffering from her mourning, her sense of being a victim, her sense of being at the mercy of all the calamity that she lived through. And she wants Naomi to understand that people care about her. Okay, that this is not just about Ruth. And that's the beauty of Ruth too. Ruth understands that this is not just about her relationship with Boaz. There's a much bigger picture that's unfolding here. And that's part of what she's communicating to her mother-in-law. So it's not a terrible white lie, but I think it's important to understand what is motivating this. So Naomi's response is, "Stay here, daughter, till you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." Right? In other words, please God, there will be a happy ending here. Notice, again, coming full circle on this chapter, remember I said we started Home Alone, okay, and we're ending Home Alone. That's where we are now, okay? Another very important comment, Frederick Bush talks about how, listen carefully, this exchange between Ruth and Naomi comprises the last words that either of them will utter in the entire story. Poised on the threshold of fulfillment, they both step aside. Quote, the drama ceases to be their story and becomes the story about them. Boaz clearly now takes center stage, and the imminence of his action is indicated both by Naomi's assertion and by the fact that this act ends differently from the two preceding ones. Our narrator concluded the first act with a pointed allusion to the barley harvest, subtly suggesting the end of famine and emptiness. At the end of the second chapter, he brought all progress in the story to a halt by noting that when the harvest was over, Ruth still lived with her mother-in-law, signaling the return of famine and emptiness. But this act concludes with no such narrative statement. Our narrator leaves ringing in our ears only Naomi's supremely confident words that Boaz will not rest this day unless the matter is settled. Boaz's symbolic gift of grain indicated to Naomi that he would act, and by centering all attention on this gift and the reason for it in Ruth's report of the night's events, the narrator signals to us that this story now rushes irrevocably toward resolution.
Mhm.
Okay, other comments or questions that you have before I share a final poem with you? I can't believe this, a group of Jews speechless.
So I have a question.
And I know that you're not all on mute.
So I have,
Hey,
I-
Eugene.
I think we all asked our questions as we went along.
Okay, great. I hear Eugene's voice here. Eugene, talk to us.
so would you go back over what was the white lie? It's not clear to me looking at the text that there was any white lie. I didn't quite follow that.
The white lie is when Ruth says to Naomi, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to me, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Okay? Boaz, at
Oh,
least.
he didn't say empty-handed.
Exactly.
That's
He
right.
never said, I'm giving you this grain for your mother-in-law. Okay? It may have been implied, but it's nowhere in the text. He never says that. So that's why I believe, Ruth is sweetening this, which is not a bad thing. I think it's telling us the kind of person, again, it's reinforcing how gracious and caring she is, especially when it comes to her mother-in-law. She knows her mother-in-law is fragile. Okay? So she wants Naomi to know that there are people out there that care about her. Don't think I'm the only person, right? But this Boaz character of yours, this Boaz, he also cares about you. So that's that I believe is the white lie here. Okay, ready for a poem. This poem was written by Catherine Hellerstein. It's entitled Ruth to Naomi After the Threshing. And she went down onto the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. Without understanding them, I followed your words, hiding in shadows of the granary while threshers, men and boys, ate well and drank. They fell asleep on bales of hay, their sieves scattered across the piles of winnowed grain. As careless as the bawdy jokes and songs they left off, mid-verse slipping into dreams, stone walls absorbed their even breathing and fresh dust from beaten husks. I held my breath as Boaz, laughing, a little drunk, yawned, belched, then lay down by a heap of corn and slept. As you instructed, I came softly to that spot, uncovered his feet, their calloused heels, worn arches in repose, and curled up there. At midnight, he turned over and brushed his foot against my scarf and suddenly sat up. Who are you? His words probed into the dark. To him, the rough-edged shadow, darkness on pure dark. Not knowing why, I answered, Ruth, your handmaid. Spread your skirt upon me. You are a near kinsman. His reply blessed me as daughter. He praised me for kindness shown to you, Naomi, and to him, old man, whose grace you asked through me. I never thought to follow after young men, rich or poor, or any man since Machlon, for when I followed you, I found my way through grief. He called me daughter again, and virtuous. His beard tickled my ear. I shivered in the warmth of this man's breath as he explained your laws that let the nearer kinsmen of the dead be first to choose the widow and the land. I started to stand up. He told me, sleep, and just before the dawn broke, helped me leave unnoticed as the moon slipped from a sky. Indigo turned violet, and the sun inched up to gild the rooftops brilliant as the barley he poured in my heavy cape. You ask me, daughter, who are you? I'm filled with dreams. The chaff of widow has fallen away.
Interesting.
Right?
Beautiful.
Very, very beautiful.
Mhm.
Right? Really gives us insight into the neshama, into the soul that is Ruth. So,
So who is that? Who is that poet?
Catherine Hellerstein. I'm happy to copy this for you and send you all a copy of it.
That would be great.
That would be terrific.
But I mean, is she a contemporary poet or?
Yes, she is, and I believe she's from Ohio, because in another class I was teaching, one of my students' ears perked up and said, "I know Catherine Hellerstein." So yeah, she is a modern poet, Bible scholar.
Rabbi, could you comment on who wrote the Book of Ruth and who put it, say somebody put in all this, interesting connections of the text and et cetera, and all this meaning. And comment about who people think wrote this and when.
So Eugene, it's just about impossible to say who it is that wrote the Book of Ruth. We have an idea of the time period in which this book is written, okay, but not so much of a sense of who wrote this. Okay, many scholars make the argument that a woman wrote this book. Could very well be, but we don't know with certainty. We know historically it was written around the 5th century BCE.
So maybe I should have asked the question a different way. When was it written compared to the rest of the stories of the Bible? Was it written before or after?
It was written around the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, most likely. Okay, and the reason it was written around the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, now remember, Ezra and Nehemiah, we're talking post-exilic, after the destruction of the first temple, 587 BCE. And then what happens about 40 years later? 540 BCE, Cyrus of Persia allows the Israelites to come back to the land of Israel.
Right.
But we know well that only a minority go back. And if you read the book of Ezra, you'll see that part of the law that Ezra wants to promulgate when the Israelites come back to the land of Israel is essentially laws of racial purity, right? He wants to be sure that the Israelites are a pure people. It's believed that this book of Ruth is an argument against Ezra and Nehemiah, is a polemic against Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay, it's a polemic against this idea of the racial purity of the Israelite people, right? And it's saying very, very clearly, right? Not only are we a diverse people, not only that, but look at who becomes, right, the ancestor of King David. It's Ruth, a Moabite, right? That even, Moabites are part of the people Israel. So it makes sense in terms of, the academic argument that this is a polemic against Ezra and Nehemiah. That's why we date the text to about the 5th century.
So that means that this text was written after King David and was put in to fill a gap.
That's right. It's written, most likely it was written long after King David, even though the text itself wants us to believe that it's coming from the period of somewhere between 1200 and 1000 BCE. Okay, coming to us from the time of Judges. Remember, we said that, the text wants us to believe that that's the historical setting of the book. Okay, like you said, it wants to fill in that gap.
Thank you.
Okay, it's not to say that, remember, just because we're not talking about historical truth doesn't mean that we're not talking about truths in this book. I believe that this is giving us a very, very powerful window into Israelite society, biblical Israel in those days, what their concerns were, and how it is that we can become a better people. I know we've discussed together, part of the beauty of this is that we're learning so much Torah from a non-Israelite woman, from a Moabite, right? And that there are so many opportunities in our lives to not only learn Torah from Jews, but, to learn Torah from the peoples around us, from the other, as it were.
Do we know for how many centuries or whatever that it's the Book of Ruth has been part of the service as one of the Megillot and read on a particular holiday? Has it been centuries?
Right. So yeah. So Ira, we're talking from the rabbinic period. Okay. So from between, let's say, 250. So sometime in that period, the composition of the Mishnah, right, leading into right, and the source that we have from the Talmud, is it's a Talmudic source that makes the association gilot between these scrolls that we have in Tanakh and the festivals that we celebrate over the course of the year. Okay, so we know it's definitely from rabbinic times. It's after the closing of the canon, right? What I mean by the closing of the canon is the closing of written Torah, right? Which, the latest texts that we have in written Torah are the books of Chronicles, in addition to the book of Esther, right? So the text, is a closed text around the 4th century BCE, right?
Long time.
That's when written Torah comes together and ends up, closed. That's the canon, the holy canon. Okay, so I want to thank you all again for joining our Beit Midrash. Great to be with you. I want to remind you that we're taking a break for 1 week, and then we're picking up 2 weeks from now. Okay, it's because I have to participate in a conference at exactly this time next week. But I promise you, we are going to complete that 4th chapter of Ruth before Shavuot. So I look forward to doing that with you all. Okay, so
Thank you.
Shavuot Tov. Brett.